Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another fascinating episode of Interviews with an Exorcist. My name is John Barnwell, and I'm here with Dr. Douglas Gabriel discussing his fortuitous experiences on his precarious journey that we're learning to find. But it's all been worthwhile, I know, because I was there for quite a bit of it. And it's quite remarkable what we were able to overturn. A particularly interesting time for us was in the late 70s. And there, in the 1978 Golden Blade, they published a lecture on the human heart, and it ended up being reprinted in various forms. Uh, the human soul in relation to world evolution, and now it's in Life of the Human Soul and its relation to world evolution, volume 212. And Douglas called me the other day and he said, well, I think we should do it on the etheric body and the human heart. And so here we are.
Yes, it's a topic that Tyler once wrote in an introduction to our book called, what is that book called? There's too many books. The one called Eternal Curriculum for Wisdom Children, that you can't shut me up when it comes to the ethers and the ether body. I remember you were there when we were chosen to deliver I think 4 or 5 different topics under students presenting it to students at the Waldorf Institute. And I was chosen to give a presentation on the ethers. And so I give my presentation, charts and diagrams, gigantic handout, and I'm acting like I know what I'm talking about. And the second guy in charge, Hans, afterwards comes up to me. His face is red. He looks so upset. And he says, Douglas, this time you've gone too far. Now, I tell you that story because anytime you want to talk about Waldorf education, you're going to have to talk about the etheric body, because that's what we're doing in Waldorf education, teaching the children from 7 to 14. We're teaching their ether body. Now, why would we say we're going to talk about the ether body and the heart at the same time? Oh, because one of the most magical things in all of anthroposophy, which Rudolf Steiner revealed, is basically the inspiration for so many teachers. And that's seeing the ether body, the cosmic ether body that the child has, that is above their head and is coming down the head. And at 9, it kind of gets lodged in the throat. And then by 14, it's all settled in the heart. And so that's a special ether body. And so there's literally in the heart an image, but a very real living image in real time of the celestial spheres of the cosmos, the stars, the sun, the planets, the moon, the earth. It's all in your etheric heart. Now the question is, what is an etheric heart, and how do you study that? But essentially, when I decided to no longer be a priest, I decided I wanted to be a Waldorf teacher. It was because Rudolf Steiner had said that there are 3 ways to get initiation in our time that are overt. There are others, but one of them is in today's show notes. At the end of the show notes, you will find a long meditation called the Foundation Stone Meditation. And make sure, if you don't understand what we're talking about, so you'll see it, it's a poem, it's at the back. So it's a few pages. You'll notice that a lot of times I put show notes in for these shows because people will tell me, and they tell John, that we have to listen to these things 2 and 3 times and take notes as we're listening the second, third time. Well, if you read the show notes that we're giving you, this is basically my condensation of what is being said. Now, I will go much further than what is here, but I'm going to give you the substantiation from Rudolf Steiner's own words to what it is we're talking about, because some of these things sound absolutely fantastic, as John calls it. What is it? High strangeness, or Yeah, it gets precarious. Didn't you say the word precarious a minute ago
Yes.
about describing my life? My life is extremely precarious and strange, and all these things happen. And most of the time, I had nothing to do with it. I always my favorite saying is when they call my name is it wasn't me this time, because I get blamed for a lot of stuff. So when I came to Werner and interviewed with Werner to enter into the Waldorf Institute here in Detroit, and Werner Glass was my teacher. He, I said to him, Werner, in all these educational cycles, why don't they take that lecture cycle, the human heart, and put it in one of the educational cycles, because it is part of the educational cycle. And he said, oh my gosh, you know that lecture? Has it been translated? And I said, yes, I have a translation of it in manuscript form. And he said, Douglas, I want you to promise me that from now on, because he had put me in charge of the bookstore, and anytime books needed to be found or whatever, that was my job. He says, I want you to make sure that every single person who comes to the Institute gets a copy of Rudolf Steiner's lecture called The Human Heart. Now, why would he say that? There's over 6,000 lectures. And yeah, it's a great lecture cycle. And by the way, I did do that, and I did make it available for everyone. And I also got it printed at some of the printing presses that we funded through the foundation that I helped create called Waldorf Educational Foundation. But also, you can find it in this book, my first book on education called The Spirit of Childhood. Good luck finding this. You can find it online for free at our site, the eternalcurriculum.com. Go on there. You can find not only that lecture, The Human Heart, inside of the book, The Spirit of Childhood, but you'll also find the other two books that are part of what we needed to do to make a presentation on Waldorf education. So we wrote the book that is, anytime you want to talk about the etheric or the ethers, good luck, because there's hardly any book that will describe it, especially the way you need to as a teacher. So this is called the eternal ethers. And of course, the ethers make up the etheric formative forces, which make up the etheric body. And then there are selections of it in this book, which is also found on that site, the Eternal Curriculum for Wisdom Children is the name of the book. And as soon as you open it, you'll see this picture and it says the ethers. So as soon as you want to talk about Waldorf, the first thing I'm going to say is the ethers. Why? Because without that, you can't understand the look of what you're doing. Okay. That's just the reality. And how many Waldorf teachers actually understand the ethers? Very few. And mind you, I've trained hundreds of them, if not thousands. And I can tell you that it's so hard to understand that it takes, I don't know how many decades, John, do you think it takes to understand the ethers, or what Steiner says, as you know, the etheric formative forces come into us from the celestial sphere. And you go, what's an etheric formative force? How long do you think?
I think there's the most succinct thing I could say is there is no end, because that is the root of the permutations. And to not prevaricate or try and duck your question, but to really give it the kind of context it deserves is the broadest consideration, really. Because when you start talking about, well, for example, in the Theosophical Society, there was a book released called Nature's Finer Forces by Rama Prasad, and it talked about the etheric cycle of the day, the fivefold cycle that started from sunrise. But people started tampering with it with breathing exercises and threw themselves out of whack. You can't just arbitrarily disrespect the ethers and think that you're going to come up with something good. And the whole basis of Waldorf education is the idea that you're trying to give something that should have been given by the parents, really, but it's that wholesome cultivation of soul and spirit that is allowing the development to unfold. So the first 7 years, essentially, you're like a gardener, right? Because you're working the etheric body primarily. And then when you get to the change of teeth, then it goes into the astral development, which astral we share with the animal kingdom. So you're dealing with these little critters running around the classroom at times. And I'm just kind of awesomely, I don't want to say jealous because I'm not jealous, but I wish I could have done that too myself, but I hadn't. I had to deal with adults, and so we all have different paths. But it was so clear what Waldorf education was just by watching him be a teacher in a Waldorf school and see that his children behaved differently than all the other children in the school, and that they were so respectful of him. And that's something I've noticed in days of late is how kind of chaotic, socially chaotic young people have become, and why. They're given a smartphone when they're 6 years old.
And then they think they deserve it. That's the worst part.
Did I answer your question?
Well, yes, because that is the only answer. You have to study it for the rest of your life, and then some, and then a few more lives, and then some more. And there's no end to it, because what I'm going to explain here is so incredible that it's almost unbelievable. And it's something that if you want to learn the limit of an anthroposophist, which I'd always say for my last questions when I'd interview all these people who knew Rudolf Steiner, I'd save the questions about the ethers for the last, because it would embarrass people, because they really didn't know much at all about the ethers. But the answer to all the questions is the etheric body, right? Or thinking, feeling, and willing. That's the first answer to all anthroposophic questions: thinking, feeling, and willing. But after that, then it comes down to warmth, light, sound, and life. In other words, the ethers. And then the etheric body, and then the etheric formative forces, and all these things. Those are the answers to all of the mechanical questions. The people who studied magic in the past studied them under the guise of tattvas. And what John mentioned, Rama Prasad's book, you can find all of that in this book here. Rama Prasad's Nature Finer Forces quotes Blavatsky, Steiner, all the great anthroposophists on the ethers, the modern theories that relate to the ethers, which almost every modern theory of everything has an etheric component to it. Etherons, or they make up stuff.
This is the symbol of Ka. It's like
Ka.
And the Ka is the Egyptian version of the etheric body, and they would leave food offerings for it. Not that it would eat the physical food, but that it would be able to receive sustenance from its etheric formative forces, essentially, is what it was. And they would designate chapels and the whole thing. But what's interesting is that, well, what's up with the arms? Well, in the mythos of ancient Egypt, it's said that the god Khnum, Khnum, and he had these spiral horns, and he was a potter, and he would sit at a potter's wheel, and he would fashion the Ka. So that's like an image of that, the cosmic force of the hierarchies, fashioning the incarnating Ka for the incoming soul. I mean, it's just amazing that once you know the esoteric, and then you can look at things like ancient Egypt and find things that Egyptologists never say. I mean, you could believe me, I looked, and you can go on and on and on, and that association isn't there. And furthermore, if you do mention it, they won't buy your book. Like they don't. Your standard Egyptologist does not own the books of Schwaller-de-Lubitz, but yet H. Schwaller-de-Lubitz is the one who's closest to that type of thinking of which we're making reference to, that was actually an Egyptologist. I mean, he lived in Luxor for, 14, 15 years, And so in looking at this is really kind of, I don't want to call it nuts and bolts, but it's similar to the nuts and bolts of creation. It's that, what is that formative impulse that arises from the cosmos to create a human being. And the Egyptians called it Khnum. And Rudolf Steiner describes it as the image of the heart. And he's telling you that this is not like a metaphor or anything. This is the reality. When you look at it, you can see it if you have the clairvoyant ability. So this is very deep and powerful stuff. And yes, it is central to Waldorf education. And is it widespread knowledge amongst Waldorf teachers? I don't know. It remains to be seen on my part. But if they're listening now, this is something you should be learning.
Oh, yes. It's will open your eyes to be able to understand what it is you're observing with the child. And it will also, because it's a path of initiation, if you take the in a Waldorf school, you take the group of children, same group from 1st through 8th grade. And if you do that, that is a path of initiation. Also practicing the rhythms of the foundation stone meditation, which I say is in the show notes. But you have to find the rhythms, because when you talk about the ether body, one thing that all the Waldorf teachers will know is the following. It's your rhythm body. It's a body of memory, and it's a body filled with the pictures of memories. And that's about it. They'll be able to tell you, 3, 4 things about the ether body. Then you say, what is an ether body? Are the ethers part of the ether body? I don't know. By the way, one of the reasons he shows you Egyptian things is we are at a higher level of recapitulating the Egyptian age of civilization here in our German Anglican age since 1413. And so as we're developing the consciousness soul in this age, we are actually going back and revisiting at a higher level some of the things that the Egyptians knew quite well. So some of these things are talked about. And first I want to say, why does this relate to exorcisms? Here's the deal. I suggest that if somebody tells you they're an exorcist or they're a priest and they can do the rite of exorcism, I would first ask that person a simple question. Are you clairvoyant? And if they say no, then you can say you're full of beans and just walk away, go the other direction. Because if you're not clairvoyant, it'll mess you up. You go in and your chakras will come out so messed up, because when you see a person who's really, really possessed, what often happens? Levitation. What they call poltergeist. Things get thrown around the room. I think I've told the story where the worst case, one of the worst cases I've ever seen was the girl who had the comb her hair while she just sat in the bed, and she'd levitate and she could make the bed move across the room. It almost killed Father William trying to squish him up against the wall when he was in his wheelchair. So how is it that a possessed person can defy gravity? It's very simple. Because warmth, light, sound, and life, the warmth and light are levity, and sound and life are gravity. So when you get the ethers in your body all messed up, and your physical, etheric, astral, and ego is just a big mess, a word salad, all discombobulated, you have different energies. You can't even, their chakras don't even look like chakras. Their chakras look like some kind of deformed thing where one chakra is bleeding into another one, and it's all messed up. So you'll see things like levity. You'll see things happening. Why? Because levity is an exaggeration of one of the ethers. Or you'll see things being moved, being able to control objects, which is being able to control really gravity and the difference between gravity and levity. So when you talk about the ethers, it's really a back and forth, male, female, warmth and light, levity, sound and life, gravity, and that they're constantly interchanging. So when you look at somebody who is possessed, and that's the reason I can look at these ridiculous things that people present on the internet of somebody being possessed. And, even now, though I'm not clairvoyant like I used to be, I can just look at them and say, no, that's complete nonsense. The person's acting and they're trying to hide something, and you can see it. Why? Because their chakras aren't all messed up. But you see a person possessed and their sex chakra might be up here on their crown chakra, and it might be just exploding, being ripped to pieces, or it could be where it's supposed to be, but it's all ripped to pieces. It's got no petals on it, or it's spinning backwards, or it's taking energy in from the front instead of from the back. And if you don't know this, then you can't really tell whether all your prayers and your prayers to heaven to ask for intervention here through Christ, through Sophia, through all the saints, as I've mentioned before, you can't really tell if what you did any good. For instance, the movie now, The Pope's Exorcist, Gabriella Armonth. He literally says he never knew out of what was it, thousands of cases, if any of them ever lost their possession because they weren't. He wouldn't know a possession if it bit him in the rear. Why? Because he's not clairvoyant. Now his boss, who allowed him to do this, he was quite clairvoyant. Father William was quite clairvoyant. The other two exorcists that Father William referred to in America at the time were completely clairvoyant. So without that, you're just not going to be able to get anywhere. So you look at a child. Well, what happens? I'm going to start making references, though I'm not going to tell the story in order. But in my class, it started off with like 20 children. And so many children kept coming because they found out that it didn't matter. I would take children no matter what. I took some of the worst children you could possibly ever see, children with Tourette's, children who, were called special education, children who had severe problems, children with very difficult social problems, you name it, all came to my class. Eventually, at one point, I think I had 30 some children in the classroom, right? Which was way more than anybody ever had. Why? Because if you use the etheric body properly, the whole point of education is very simple. And it's also very simple for how to become spiritual. You have to develop habits that are so ingrained that you do them automatically without thinking. For instance, you have to do your prayers every morning. You should do that so that, you couldn't possibly not do it. You have to do it. Why? Because it's part of your rhythm. And then at night, you have to do your ruksha and your prayers and your examination of your conscience. It is what you do rhythmically that will have spiritual impact. So what we do with the children, people will come to the classroom and they would be so amazed because I got to the point where I didn't even need to speak. I could just use gestures and I could give 10 directives with my hands, and that just set the stage for them doing all this stuff that people are going, why did they start doing all this? Why did they move all their desks to the side? Why did they make a circle? Why did they do this? Because it's rhythmic.
Believe me, I've seen it. He'll be there with his kids and he'd start moving his arms around and they'll just all line up. It's like, wow, that's pretty good.
Well, the child there's a Waldorf principle that your higher body above the child is what's really teaching them. So you don't go and try to strengthen your etheric body. It should have been strengthened before you started teaching, because otherwise it'll wear you out and you'll be so tired you'll just not be able to do it. But it's your higher body above that. So the higher body above the etheric body is the astral. The astral body, okay, everyone out there in the whole world, raise your hand if you've tamed your astral body. Yeah, no hands are up. Why? Because nobody has. And if you have, then it's an amazing thing, because that means that all your desires are under control. It means you don't even have thoughts that are not under control. So for me, and what happens to most people who come and see the magic in a Waldorf classroom is they say, oh, I wish I would have had that when I was young. Can I please come and be one of your students? I promise I'll be good. I'll sit in the back. I know I'm big, but you can maybe get a desk my size. All the adults who ever came to observe, every single one of them said the same thing. They wish they would have had that for themselves, and they'd like to do it now. Well, I said that. I saw Waldorf and I said, oh, I want that. So I put myself through it by being the teacher. And so I got that benefit of redoing my etheric body and being forced to tame my astral body. Not one stray thought can happen in the classroom because the children are clairvoyant. They'll pick it up, right? You can't fake the taming of your astral body.
I have to share just this one sentence from the second paragraph of the lecture, believe me, if it's that early in the lecture, it's very important. And he's talking about children, and he says, is primarily an imitative being whose inner nature orients itself to its environment and the effect of the outer world upon him as he imitates it. That's why it is so important that at this age we do nothing in the child's proximity that the child cannot absorb and assimilate. And this includes the very way we think and feel. So there's a certain presence of mind you have to pull this off. And that's what he's referring to. They will catch you at every turn. If you lose it, it all breaks loose, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like opening the dam, all of a sudden, oh, good, we can be chaotic.
Every morning we started off doing circle dances, and I was a Sufi dancer. So I know so many circle dances. And if I missed one single word, oh, that was it. And it was all memorized, of course. So, we had literally by the end of the, yes, ma'am.
Yes, here I am. Because as you're, John, I don't know if you know, but we cats out here at the American Intelligence Media and over on Gab are really looking at this whole thing called, what is it, the biofield, right? Now, you may in anthroposophy call it something else, the chakras, the etheric body, but essentially in Waldorf education, just to bring this down to earth to people who are just listening, you're really educating the etheric body. And the teacher is bringing that in. So like when you're doing Sufi dancing, you are strengthening your own biofield, and the children are in that biofield, and everyone is being elevated. Because you see, the way that the Babylonian Radonites have been attacking us for thousands of years is by penetrating, piercing, and destroying our biofields. What is that? Well, we have been posting a lot of information on it, but once it's destroyed, then demons can enter into you. And then you talk about sex chakras on your head. Well, that looks like any parade you might see for the XYZ community. Okay. so that's, you've got all this distortion going on in your chakras. And what we're trying to do, what we have been trying to do for the last 10 years and working in a more public setting, is to help you create your bio arc. And you've heard us say the bio arc many times. What is that? Well, that is aligning your chakras, getting yourself in a good resonance, and then expanding out into your living environment. So that becomes your bio arc. You prepare yourself nutritionally, you spiritually. What are you reading? What are you doing? Because once you strengthen this bio arc, and John knows this, and so does Douglas, no harm comes to you, because that is your shield of armor, and we all build it up. And that's how we protect ourselves going forward. So the world is not as dismal as it may look when you know that you can strengthen your biofield.
We all build up, but we also are the ones that mess it up. And that's important that we take responsibility for the state of what she's referring to.
Well, I agree, because you make the choice of whether you want a GMO apple or an apple from the orchard, that's natural. But then again, we're not educated. People don't know the difference. The school system has become just an indoctrination center, and there are no mothers around and grandmothers to teach the way of home economics anymore. These are the things that help a family and individuals have a good, strong biofield to ward off evil.
Absolutely. And Rudolf Steiner pointed out Waldorf education would be wasted on the children if they didn't have proper nutrition.
Yes, it starts with what you're eating.
That's why we have biodynamic gardening around most Waldorf schools. That's why in the fourth grade we have our own garden, and the children grow a biodynamic garden. And that's why most of the children come from fairly healthy families, and families that, really, they have to come up with a lot of money to go to private Waldorf schools. So they make huge sacrifices. And these are some of the healthiest, coolest parents that you've ever seen. And literally, as Tyler said, and I'm going to say this because I say this to teachers, and many of the teachers then quit. I've taught thousands, if not tens of thousands of teachers. And I say this, and I can't tell you how much this makes them either ecstatic or depressed. And then they know they're not an educator. You don't teach anything except one thing as a teacher: who you are. So if you're going to eat junk at lunch at a Waldorf school, then you ain't a Waldorf teacher. If you don't have your astral body tamed, then you're not a Waldorf teacher, and you're certainly not going to be able to teach the etheric in a rhythmic fashion because you haven't tamed your astral body. And when you go into a possession, an exorcism, if your astral body is not tamed, you would not believe what happens. It's that sometimes the second you walk in, because you're usually wearing a cross and that sets the demon off, or demons, and they start screaming at you your sins that nobody knows by name to the people you did it to. So, the things you see on TV and the movies, ignore all that. That's not it. But when you meet a real demon possessed person, have you ever met somebody like that who gets right in your face and they got x-rays coming out of their head and you feel like you're in a trap in your prison, and then they just start telling you stuff, and whether you like it or not, it goes right in and you have to do it? That is what I'm talking about. But if you have your astral body tamed and the person's doing that to you, you say, Kevin, you need to stop that. Please back up. I know what you're doing. But if you start screaming at the child, that's not going to work. So I've never had a problem with any of the children, and I have had the craziest, and I mean crazy. These are from 3 states, they'd bring them to our stabilization unit, and I liked all those children. I could relate to them. I don't know why. But the point is, yes, Tyler's right. It has to do with your intestines because that's your willpower.
John has something to say at this point. I don't know if you noticed his hand was up.
Yeah, it's well.
I didn't call on him, so he can't talk.
No,
yet.
I like Douglas is like me. He tries to speak in a complete thought. It's just some thoughts.
And I don't. I interrupt and get.
But anyways, well, yeah, it was going back to the foreword or the introduction to the agriculture course. And what is shared in that, and you look at what he had said to Aaron Pfeiffer, because Pfeiffer asked Rudolf Steiner, these people are doing all these techniques that you give out, like in Knowledge of Higher Worlds, but they're not getting the kind of results they'd hoped for. And he said it's a problem of nutrition. And so this is not just for people that are Waldorf teachers or people that have kids. This is also for people that don't fit either of those categories. Is that this is the human condition that we're living in, and you can be cultivating your path or not, and the field can lie fallow, and so what does that mean? What's going to happen if you don't attend to your garden? And so that's kind of what we're looking at here.
And gardening is another way that I was told by old anthroposophists to open up your ability to clairvoyantly see the etheric. Garden, do the foundation stone rhythms, or go be a Waldorf teacher. Now, life body, etheric body, life body. So that's what it's about. That's what Tyler's talking about. And also what John quoted from the beginning. And also in the fact that the life in the classroom, every single piece of paper, every push pin, every staple, every pencil, the way you arrange it in a classroom goes right into the child's etheric body. Messy classroom, messy teacher, messy thinking, poor results. Guaranteed. I can look at a teacher, I can look at a person coming for an interview, and mind you, oh Lord, I think at my last job, I was there 11 years, I had 250 staff, most of them teachers. Before they sit down for the interview, I can tell you if they're going to be a good teacher. And as soon as they speak, then I know, because every word that is spoken with coldness harms the etheric heart of the child. And we'll get into what the etheric heart is in a minute. Every gesture that is harsh harms the child. It goes right into them. They live with that. A child who's been abused, the social workers would do this to me. They do a quick motion like this to scratch their face. And if the child jumped back, well, guess what?
Once we wrote the eternal curriculum for wisdom children, people would say they wanted that type of education. And we told them that by reading the book, even as adults, they would give themselves this education that they missed as children. Can you address that?
Yes. In my first book, before Tyler came along, I did a really bad job, and I just kind of threw it all in here. And in here, it describes the first grade curriculum, a little bit of the second, and then spells the rest of the curriculum out. Okay. And then it gives a lot of other articles and stuff, plus the human heart and the human ears in there. But in this book is different. This book says Rudolf Steiner was right when he said ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, the development of the individual recapitulates the social, cultural, and to a degree, physical development of humanity. So the human, as they're growing, is literally going through ancient history right up to the present time. By the time they reach 8th grade, we're supposed to have already, throughout 8th grade, realized that they were citizens on the earth, of the whole earth, in their own time. Before that, they're not in time and space. And Steiner gives the curriculum and shows you how it works. But this book, The Eternal Curriculum, exactly as Tyler said, was written also for the parents and for also teachers. So it's for teachers, parents, and children. So there's a section for the children on what to teach so that you recapitulate the ages of civilization. Steiner talks about ancient India, ancient Persia, even back to Atlantis, to China, to ancient India, Persia, Egypt, Greek, our time, and then even on into the future, because the child literally goes into the future in their development. So in this book are also many selections throughout for the grades of what a teacher should be studying, so that they're doing the spiritual work of what I talked about, taming the astral body and imprinting into their own ether body the wisdom on an adult level that will give them insight into what the child is then experiencing, which is also given in the book as the language arts content for the grades 1st through 8th. So, and there's also a lot of pedagogical information in there and talking about Steiner's methodology. But the point is, just as Tyler said, this thing that is called Waldorf education is the best curriculum ever written. It takes I could go into all the different people who say that there are in history a clear evolution of the development of intellect, the development of civilization. And they spell them out. And many of them, like the Kingfisher history book, took it straight from Steiner. You have William Irwin Thompson has his version. You have all kinds of versions of it. And I mentioned them in these. So it's also, she's showing you the page for the Eternal Curriculum. And those are chapters of a book, which I haven't mentioned. Oh, and that's the Spirit of Childhood book that I did mention. There's also the book, the Eternal, called the Intuitive Learning. Now, intuitive learning I developed because I was teaching public school teachers, and I wanted them to use the methodology, but I couldn't get them to study the theory and the spiritual content of Waldorf education, even though that's what is in the Eternal Curriculum book. I had to give them methodologies that were linked to what are called best practices in education. So there's a book in here that's also free that I developed when I was a superintendent for the working with all these teachers, because they were all public school teachers. None of them were anthroposophists, Waldorf, or anything like that. And so it is spelled out. So I basically take and do what the Waldorf people think I should be hung for, which is to explain the methodology and say, you can do this too, even though you haven't done a teacher training in Waldorf education and a whole year of study of anthroposophy before your teacher training, which is 2 years. And then a specific early childhood education, junior high, high school, special education, curative education, all that's extra. So if you're just a teacher, and I've done this with literally hundreds of teachers, and in conferences, I've reached thousands of teachers with this book, Intuitive Learning, because it says that if you do what I mentioned before is the entire intent of Waldorf education, which is to make their life so rhythmic, so beautiful, with such good habits, that they know before you do that it's exactly a certain time. It's time for painting class. So we're going to start singing the painting song. And then the class spontaneously, without looking at any clocks, because there's no clocks. You don't allow clocks or phones or anything like that in a Waldorf classroom, nothing electronic, basically. They start humming the song for painting class. Well, painting class is only twice a week at a certain time, and but it's so in their etheric body that they literally, I literally let the children take over for me by the time I was with them in 4th and 5th grade, and let them conduct the class. And they would conduct it exactly like I would conduct it, with the exact same gestures, movement, tone, words, you name it. You want to see something complicated, go into a Waldorf classroom, because what you will see, you will think a human can't do, but all the children do it. Special ed, difficult children, doesn't matter. By the time a child enters, if the child enters 1st grade, with no matter what their difficulty is, by 8th grade, you're probably not going to be able to notice they have any difficulties. There'll be a virtuoso violin player. All my children played violin. I played it with them. They were much better than me. They outstripped me. They were so much ahead of me in playing the violin that I gave up after a while. But we all play the recorder. They all play that. They all play another instrument too. They are all in plays. We write plays. We illustrate. Every one of them from 1st grade is becoming an illustrator and someone who can speak in a play, stand up. So I had some children who were so amazing that they begged me, Mr. Gabriel, can I conduct the spelling test today? And I said, well, how do you know you're going to make 100, get them all right? And then she just spelled all the words right there. Like, okay, you can lead them. So here's the littlest girl in class, leading a class of more children than anybody should ever have in a classroom, and never has a problem with anyone. Why? Because it's all rhythmic. All she had to do was replicate it. Now, I had master teachers come into my classroom. Matter of fact, I had every student that went through Eastern Michigan University and got a degree in teaching certificate had to come through my classroom. That was their rule, and that was true with some other Wayne State University. So I had hundreds and hundreds of people coming through my classroom. And on any day, there'd be 20 people standing in the back. Children ignored them until I'd say, okay, now, students, would you please teach our guests what you're doing? And these people would get an education from the children, right? And they'd show them their books and they'd show them what they're doing. And people would start crying. I mean, literally half the people, when the students would show them their skills, they would cry, right? And then they wanted to be teachers. But some teachers, when they found out that all you can teach is who you are, they gave up because they knew who they were. And they didn't want that coming back to them from their children. So whatever you give the child out of your astral body comes back through their etheric body. So you better get yourself into a beautiful rhythmic pattern and then study this stuff so that you know that when you're teaching 1st grade fairy tales, there's a reason for it. And the reason is what Steiner describes. He says above the head, when the child is born, and you can see this because their fontanelle is open, the soft part on the top of their head, way open. Matter of fact, I've seen children where the fontanelle came to their ears and all the way to their forehead and the back. That's my son, matter of fact. And, they still got an etheric head up here. What is this etheric head? It's really also their head and their heart, but it's an exact replica, a moving virtual, but it's in exact timing with what's going on in the universe right now. And it starts to sink down. And over 7 years, they're born with already an etheric heart. That's through heredity that they were given by their parents, but they have to replace it. So this etheric heart is up here at first, and it starts to sink down. And you can watch this. I was clairvoyant at the time. I'd watch this. I'd watch their development. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my whole life. It's kind of like watching your garden grow. And it would come down and it'd get kind of stuck here, of course, and then it'd get kind of stuck here, and then it'd get down to here. And once it got down to here, you could see that those stars that were shining and twinkling start to raise. So for 7 years, you watch this happen until when it finally gets down completely in their heart, and they have taken over the rhythm of their breathing and their breath and the rhythm of their life in school, as I described. It is so beautiful. It's raying out like stars that are like a sun. And basically, that's where everyone goes when they sleep at night. We don't go all the way out to the realm of Saturn. We go to this replica in us, Steiner says. And it's a living, moving, in-time replica, synchronized. And so literally inside of your heart, you have the whole cosmos there. And the child, when it gets that, is so happy because it overcomes the inherited heart and what their parents are teaching them, good or ill. And they impress their own rhythms on their heart. And that changes their breathing and their heartbeat. And then it starts to ray out. Well, Rudolf Steiner says that when it's coming down from the head, it pushes out the first teeth. It's called the second dentition of the teeth, or the second teeth. So it pushes out those teeth. You can look at those teeth, and as you're seeing this head come down, you can predict everything about their learning skills so accurately. I've done this so many times that the teachers just go, "You can't know. How can you know this? Because I'm looking at their teeth." So if the teeth come in at the top, that's because their thinking came in first. If the teeth come in at the bottom, that's because their will came in. So you're going to know whether they're will or thinking oriented just by looking at their teeth. And then their molars tell about how they're adapting in their feeling realm to the rest of the world. So you can look at their teeth. So it pushes the teeth out. And at that moment, when the second teeth come in, when they're usually around 7, but here in America it happens early, and they go to school early, a year early, that's when they're ready for the convolutions of their brain to have the impress of the etheric body, the astral body impressing on the etheric body, impressing on the physical body, the convolutions of their brain, so that they can memorize things. Until then, you shouldn't have them memorize much of anything. After that, they can memorize everything. Okay, I'm not exaggerating, because people used to say, "Oh, well, you have a photographic memory." No, I didn't. I just remembered what I looked at and took a picture of. Right? I look at it and take a picture of it, and then I could remember it. I remember the page. Remember when I used to quote the page of a Steiner thing? Oh, it's in the blue book, and it's on the left side, and it's at the top. It's in the first paragraph, and it's page number 13. Why? Because I took a picture of it. Well, I taught my children so many things that no one had ever seen a class in first grade and then on through, so much. And so all the specialty teachers, the German teacher, the French teacher, the music teacher, all these teachers would come in by Christmas and said, "Douglas, what am I going to do? They've exhausted my entire curriculum. I now have to invent more stuff to teach them because they've memorized all of it fluently. Every child in the class memorized it." You have no limit to your memory, especially if the person that you're mimicking, your teacher, has a really good memory. So by the time that we were doing Shakespeare plays, the prompter and myself memorized the entire Shakespeare play word for word, and we didn't cut anything out of it. And so that's what happens in a Waldorf school. But you're not teaching memory; you're teaching capacity. So the capacity to memorize all that then becomes one that can be transferred to anything else. And so in 8th grade, when I graduated my last 8th grade class, they all took the standardized tests. And the lowest score in that class was 12 plus. Some of them were already beyond college level in 8th grade. And we don't give them tests. I had never given them a test. So when we gave them the standardized test, then what happens? They get invited to any high school. When they take that test, at the end of that, they're invited to Ivy League colleges. It used to be any Waldorf student had been in a Waldorf school for more than 8 years, first kindergarten or preschool through 12th grade, would automatically be accepted into Harvard, Yale, all of them, all the Ivy League colleges.
Well, I don't think Harvard is such a big deal,
No,
because
I
that's
wouldn't
where
go there.
they're training all the Babylonian Radonites. I'd be more impressed if they got into some other schools. But the point here is that we're both educators, John, as you know, that education has been nothing but the state curriculum, which is all indoctrination being shoved down these children without any regard of their spiritual development. And I'm sad to say, because I moved to Michigan to be in a Waldorf community with a small child. If the teachers don't understand anthroposophy, then they're just a regular teacher. There's nothing magical going on, but you don't have to miss out. If you miss this type of education, you can study the book that we just suggested and build up your own etheric forces, because you're going to have this to protect yourself from the attacks on your etheric body.
So true. And I wanted to qualify.
But don't
Do not-
qualify too much, because I really want to
No.
hear John's feedback to
I
all
got to
of this.
qualify what I'm saying. Please don't take it that all Waldorf schools are magical. Waldorf schools right now, I'm sorry to have to say, have very few, if any, people studying Rudolf Steiner anthroposophy. And I could say that literally every Waldorf school that I have intimate knowledge of right now doesn't have a single lead teacher, not one single anthroposophist in it. So, just as Tyler's was talking about, some children get in Waldorf and they don't like it. Or if you get a teacher who's not really trained in anthroposophy, then it may not even be good for you. So I'm not saying that you need to rush out and join, put your child in the Waldorf school no matter what. No, I'm saying do it yourself, as Tyler just said. Get this book, study it yourself, teach your child from home if you have to.
Keep in mind, Douglas, did you go to a Waldorf school?
No.
Neither
No.
did I. Okay, and so let's not make this like some kind of exclusionary concept, but what we're trying to do is get people to understand the principles of the cultivation of the etheric body. And you get extreme examples. For example, Mozart, age 6, he's taken to a performance of a work that's so special and sacred that they don't write it down. And as soon as he got home, he wrote the whole thing down. Okay? Well, I don't know about you, but I couldn't do that. And so this is something that is accumulative in your evolution. And so you can't just say, well, Mozart did that because he had good DNA. That's missing. The big part of the equation is that you have a reincarnating individual there. And the more you can give them the proper environment to be able to cultivate whatever virtues they can bring to the table from their past, you allow it to come forth more easily if you give them things rhythmically, like Douglas is saying, in the context of their stage of development and the corresponding historical periods. It can achieve quite a magical result. And so
Yes,
I believe me, I've been watching it for years, and it's very special. And he's right that I've seen teachers that didn't have what we're talking about.
and you can get some of the qualities of Waldorf through Orff training, Orff music training, which I wonder if he, Orff, Waldorf, I don't know. And he's German. I mean, he does the same thing we do: pentatonic music, percussion instruments, walking, dancing, rhythmic walking and dancing turns into math. And there's nothing better for the development of the mind than moving all your fingers in music on an instrument, especially if it's being controlled by your breath, which is what we do in Waldorf called box recorders, or we just call them recorders or box flutes. And then we teach everything, like the violin. We teach the whole song at once, just like Suzuki method. Why? Don't underestimate your child, and don't ever, when you're teaching them, sink it down to what you think is their level. Their level is probably beyond your level, so you should not dumb down education. And if you want to read a great book on it, John Taylor Gatto has written a number of books, and he's just marvelous at showing how our present education is just militaristic. And so the deal is, I'm not saying Waldorf education is the only answers, particularly at our age. I'm saying that it's the teacher. That's the secret. The teacher. If the teacher has this stuff in them, they can impart it to others. For instance, our good friend Howard Weingarten. I brought him into a prison setting. He'd never taught. He only had like one job in his life. He was a tremendous artist. And he came in, and because he loved the students, he taught them better than any art teacher I've ever seen in any school anywhere.
But if you've been through the public school system, or those that mimic the public school setting, you think that school is first period, second period, recess, everything is broken and siloed. They're training you to only think in silos. It wasn't until I got to graduate school where I was exposed to the political, the humanities, the arts, music, everything all at once, because I got a humanities degree, that I began to have a world view of things. Well, this with Waldorf and education, like the things that Douglas is describing, that gives the child an understanding of their place in the world, not only as they stand in it this day, but over history. Because if we don't know our historical place, we won't know where we are in our own spiritual development. So I have had people look at the Waldorf material that we've provided, and they go, but where do you teach this particular subject or that particular subject? I go, no. It's teaching the etheric body so that it is strong, that it can stand upright, and it can meet their educational and skill needs as it approaches them in life. Some students turn out to go up to these Ivy League schools, but others become carpenters and amazing sculptors. So they have to find their capacity within themselves after this education.
So
Absolutely. And that's why it's proper to look on it as cultivating, because you're allowing this thing to bud and then come forth as like a flower of their life path. And that's what's so important. It's their life path. So it behooves you to be able to serve as the proper shepherd, so to speak. First, you're the gardener, then you're the shepherd, and so from 0 to 7, you're the gardener cultivating that etheric body. And then as they go through the change of teeth and you move into the period that corresponds to the astral body that we share with the animal kingdom, then that is a different modality as they start moving towards where they can start to be prepared to have their own decision-making processes going on. And in present day education, they try to screw all that up, basically. But so you can be a remedy for your own education and indoctrination by studying these things, even if you don't have any kids and you don't really interested in Waldorf education. You should be, but as far as
it'll build capacities for you in your next lifetime.
Yeah, well, again, if you get into like the Western esoteric tradition, for example, if I might digress just a little bit, because Rudolf Steiner says you have like, how do you cultivate the etheric body? Art, music, and religion and history. Those are the things that you could really approach, and you see, well, what things do they share? And when you start realizing that it has to do with getting into that realm of the transformation of the etheric, that's really an exalted level. So to think that you're going to just jump into this high level curriculum, no, but you can create a foundation, a solid foundation. And so the training in esoteric tradition, like in the lodges, they would use all kinds of symbols. Why? Because that's educating the etheric body. And that's the point of all that symbology that they use. And so you see some of the really kind of strained goofball representations by people that are chasing conspiracy theories. And yes, these are things that become used for the wrong purpose. There's no question, but that's not what these symbols represent. They represent this process of unfoldment, and that it's up to the individual to be able to answer, to understand that a pentagram is the etheric body, a hexagram is the astral body. Once you know that, it frees you from being unconsciously locked into the symbols.
Waldorf is a developmental curriculum that provides for children exactly what they need at the exact right moment, like nourishment. And they eat it up so much that when you, as a teacher, almost every teacher will tell you this, I'd say 75% of teachers at least, the reason they teach is to see the light go on in a child's eyes when they get it, when they themselves got it. You didn't give it to them. You could have tried 50,000 times, but one time they go, oh, and they get it, and then you see the light. That's that flame. That's the light that we're trying to enkindle to become really a conflagration of the spirit. So we have 4 births. We have the physical birth of the body from birth until age 7. At age 7, we have the etheric body has descended down into the heart. And for 7 years, from 7 to 14, we're trying to feed that etheric body because it's the life body. What you do in those 7 years will determine the health of that person for the rest of their life, period. Their organs are being created by everything you say and do in that classroom. And then at 14, when we go into high school, that's the birth of the astral body. And if they've come through Waldorf education, then they're not going to be as wild and crazy with an untamed astral body. They're going to have an astral body that is already a virtuoso musician and a dramatist and artist. And so they have capacities, incredible capacities. Then at age 21, we have the birth of the ego, the I am. So up until that time, even up until the time of age 14, child doesn't have karma. Why? Because they're, the age of, the Catholics say it's age 12, the age of cognizance or whatever they call it, where they're responsible for their actions. So up until even the age of 21, your ego is just coming in at 21. You really can't count on people to have a strong foundation of their ego. So then for 7 years, their ego is developed as sentient soul, and then for 7 more intellectual soul, for 7 more consciousness soul to bring us into our own age. So all these different developmental aspects demonstrate that the human being is replicating everything that the human has, as a culture, has developed over time since basically history began, even prehistory. So we as teachers are there to midwife these very special births, and then to make sure we know exactly what to feed the child at the exact right time that they will take in like eating candy. They'll take it in like their life depended upon it. And you will be shocked as a Waldorf teacher how much further those children can go than you have as capacity. So you teach everything you are, and then after that, stand back, because it's like a missile taken off from a launching pad.
And I want to thank everybody for showing up. We got to audit a master's level Waldorf education program today, just for being here. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And so you can begin to correct perhaps certain hurdles in your own life path that can be overcome through these types of understandings. And so that's the beautiful thing, even if you're not you don't have any kids or any of those contexts, you think this doesn't apply to you, think again. But anyways, I want to thank Dr. Gabriel and Dr. Tyla Gabriel. They're just a remarkable power couple, I like to call them. They seem to get more done than is humanly possible, and that's a beautiful thing. And so I want to thank everybody for showing up. Looks like we went a couple minutes over, but I don't think anybody minds. And I hope you have a wonderful day.